All right, great. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Joan Ford Monjo, and I'm the Executive Director of the Malden Chamber of Commerce. And it's my privilege to welcome you here to our breakfast with Senator Jason Lewis to hear a legislative update. Speaking of breakfast, this is one of the things I miss the most about our in-person meetings is the food. So we had encouraged all of our Malden members to go to a local breakfast place, whether that be Do Wop Diner, Honeydew Donuts, Donut Villa Diner, Bikini Cafe, and get something for breakfast. So for those of you who did, raise your cups. Thank you for shopping locally at our small restaurants, and I'm sure that they truly appreciate your support in this terrible time. I'd now like to turn the program over to my dear friend and colleague, Lauren Grimmick of the Melrose Chamber.
Thank you, Joan. Good morning, everybody. Before I have the pleasure of introducing State Senator Jason Lewis, who I know all of you know well, I did just want to acknowledge the other elected officials in our Zoom room today. With us, we have State Representative Kate Lipper-Garabedian, who's going to have a few remarks today. We have State Representative Steve Ultrino. Thank you for joining us. We have Mayor Paul Broder from Melrose. Good morning, Mayor. We also have former Mayor from Melrose, Gail Inferna. Good morning, Gail.
Good morning.
I understand Mayor Christensen was going to join us from Malden. I don't see him yet. And apologies if there's anyone else I missed from Malden.
Lauren, we also have Representative Paul Donato.
Good morning, Representative. Thank you for being here.
Okay.
So if I may just acknowledge Senator Lewis before he gives his remarks this morning. As you know, he proudly represents the people of the 5th Middlesex District of Massachusetts. And not only does that include Malden and Melrose, but also Reading, Stoneham and Wakefield, and parts of Winchester. He was first elected to the Senate in 2014 and has delivered results not only for his district, but as a progressive leader throughout the Commonwealth. And we certainly appreciate all that he's done over the years for the small business community. He's certainly no stranger to us and our events and visiting a lot of our small businesses. He is a member of Senate President Karen Spilka's leadership team. He serves as the Senate Chair of the Joint Committee on Education and the Assistant Vice Chair of the Senate Committee on Ways and Means. He also co-founded and co-chairs the legislature's Prevention for Health Caucus and Zero Waste Caucus. I will admit I shortened the short bio that Emily sent me, so there's way more to talk about, but we know that he wants to talk with you and not about himself. So without further ado, I will let Senator Lewis give his remarks this morning.
Thanks so much, Lauren. Can you hear me okay? The volume good?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Thanks for the kind introduction, and I'm so glad you shortened it. And thanks for having me. It's great to be with everybody, even virtually. And I'm delighted that we have the entire Melrose and Malden legislative delegations with us this morning. So with Rep. Lipper-Garabedian, Ultrino, and Donato. So that's fantastic. Thank you, Mayor Broder and Mayor Inferna for joining us as well. And I also saw wonderful new, relatively new, I guess, city councilor in Malden, Amanda Linehan. It looks like Amanda's also with us this morning. So welcome to you. I want to start by thanking Lauren and Joan and Marianne and all of the staff, volunteers, and the board members of both the Malden Chamber and the Melrose Chamber for all of your hard work and really everything you've been doing these past months to help our small businesses and our nonprofits and our communities to get through this crisis that we've all been dealing with. So let me start with an update on where Massachusetts is at with our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'll give some brief remarks on sort of the pandemic and legislatively what we're working on, particularly focused on small businesses and nonprofits, but hopefully we'll have plenty of time for questions and discussion and feedback you have for me and my legislative colleagues. Good news. We have to find slivers of good news in this awful year we've been living through. But I would say the good news is the virus is much more contained here in Massachusetts and in our communities than certainly than it was back in the spring. We also know a lot more about how to protect ourselves from the virus. The number of people hospitalized and in intensive care is way down, and our hospitals are now much better prepared to treat patients than they were in the spring. And I think I see Sue Sandberg on as well, and Sue can certainly attest to that. We caught up recently, and she was telling me how different things are now at Melrose Wakefield Hospital, and that's true for our other hospitals as well. We're in a much better place there. But of course, unfortunately, the bad news is this virus certainly has not gone away. It's circulating everywhere. And the number of cases in Massachusetts and the positive test rate has been ticking up recently. It's not a spike, but it has been kind of gradually increasing. And so that's why we all know we have to remain vigilant, continue to follow, all the public health guidance that we get from experts and not from our president. And our ability to reopen and keep open our schools, our businesses, and our other institutions depends entirely on our individual and our collective actions to prevent the spread of COVID-19. So we truly all have a stake in not only protecting our health and the health of those around us, but also our ability to continue to have our economy and our society open and functioning. In addition, of course, to the tragic health impact of this virus, we've seen a devastating economic impact on our communities. I think we all are aware that too many of our families, our small businesses, nonprofits are struggling mightily. Our state's unemployment rate, which was over 16%, has fallen to now about 11%. So that obviously is an improvement, but it's still very high by historical standards. And, that's at least triple what it was before the pandemic. Hard to even remember that earlier this year. And hundreds of thousands of jobs that we lost in the spring still have not been restored. So while we have been adding jobs back in Massachusetts and around the country, we still have many hundreds of thousands that have not been restored. We are now as a state in phase 3, step 2, that is as of Monday of this week. And that's, as you know, part of the 4-phase reopening plan that Governor Baker and his reopening team laid out earlier this year. So this means that in what are considered lower risk communities, those communities that are not rated, don't have a red on the Department of Public Health's weekly dashboard, those communities, there is some increase in indoor capacity limits for a range of different industry sectors. There's a slightly greater loosening of restrictions for restaurants and other gatherings. And I think we all recognize that, we have to be cautious in proceeding. I don't personally disagree with the governor's decision, but there is certainly a yellow light, I think, coming from our public health experts, and clearly that's who we should be listening to. So I think we have to really watch closely what happens and continue to, follow these public health guidelines very, very closely, so we don't have to pause or even go backwards. I do want to say just a shout out to our schools. I think our school superintendents and principals have had just an incredibly tough job these last months, and really appreciate all of their efforts to work to reopen our schools. And while many of our students are remote right now, we're certainly hopeful that they will start to be able to come back into in-person school. And certainly for our most vulnerable students and those with special needs, that is super important that that they be able to be in person. So we are working towards that, and a lot of effort has gone on to try to make that happen. I also want to give a shout out to our YMCAs and YWCAs and Boys and Girls Clubs, because they have just stepped up in an amazing way to care for our children. The governor issued a special executive order recently that allowed organizations that don't normally care for children during school hours to be able to do so, so that students have somewhere safe to go during the school day if they can't be home. And our Ys in particular have stepped up to provide that for our children and our families. It does remain contentious, the extent to which our students should be back in classrooms or working remotely, and the same for teachers. And that debate, I think, will likely continue. But we continue to, learn more about the virus. We continue to see how our schools are doing with students in person. So, I expect that hopefully some of those issues will start to resolve themselves. Certainly, two big uncertainties that we're facing right now are, of course, what the trajectory of the virus is as we go into the colder months and spend more time indoors. Really, obviously, nobody knows for sure. And the other big uncertainty, although we did get some bad news on this yesterday, is what we can expect for another federal coronavirus relief bill. I can tell you that the CARES Act and the previous bills that Congress passed have been tremendously important and helpful in terms of unemployment insurance, small business assistance, nonprofit assistance, help for our hospitals. It's just so many areas. So there's no doubt we desperately need another federal relief bill, because only Congress has the ability to deficit spend. State and city governments don't have the ability to run deficits. So we're very constrained, in how much we can do to help our residents. The federal government obviously can deficit spend. And so that's why we're so dependent on them in a crisis like this. So it was very disappointing. I'm sure you feel the same way I did, that the president said all, negotiations are off now for the time being. Americans can't wait. There are people who are at risk of losing their housing, struggling to put food on the table. Obviously, businesses struggling to stay open. So I hope he reconsiders. I hope Republicans in the United States Senate do move forward and work with Democrats to reach a relief package. Our state government here in Massachusetts, obviously working with our federal government, have tried to take a lot of action since March to try to at least contain and mitigate the pandemic. Some of the things that we've done are dramatically expanding unemployment benefits. And for the first time ever, benefits have been available for non-W-2 workers, independent contractors, self-employed people, and so on. And at least initially, there was an additional $600 a week. So that has now gone away. But we are hopeful that with another relief package, there might be additional help for those who are still unemployed or underemployed, or whose income has been reduced by this pandemic. We've also tried to provide assistance directly to small businesses and nonprofits, and it especially includes our very hard hit restaurant sector as well. Allowing restaurants things like outdoor dining, selling alcohol, cocktails to go, things like that. And we are still working to try to cap the delivery fee. We know that's a priority for restaurants, and that I'm hopeful we will still be able to do that. We placed a moratorium on evictions and foreclosures to keep people in their homes. That is actually expiring October 17th. So we are very worried about whether we're going to see a surge in evictions. So there is work ongoing right now, both in the legislature and with the governor and in our housing court system, to try to come up with some strategies, even if the moratorium is lifted, to prevent people losing their apartments or their homes, because obviously that is not just a terrible thing for them and their families, but also could contribute to spreading the virus. So we're hopeful there's some strategies there, even if the moratorium is not further extended. There's been a significant emergency funding for hospitals, for our local public health departments, nursing homes, food pantries, and others. Also extended the federal and state tax filing deadlines into July. Electronic notarization was authorized for many business transactions. A lot of work was done to try to help our cities and towns get through this in terms of managing their budgets, permitting relief, being able to postpone elections and town meetings, things of that nature. I think our students were happy that we canceled MCAS testing in the spring, and there are discussions underway about what will happen with MCAS this current school year. And then we passed a major new law in the spring to allow mail-in voting. And we can certainly talk more if anyone's interested about the upcoming election and options for voters, which include being able to cast your ballot by mail, and that's very safe and secure. You can also vote early in person. There'll be a 2-week early in-person voting period, and then of course you can vote on election day. So we expect to see record turnout in the upcoming election. That's according to Secretary Galvin, who spoke about it yesterday. Some more very recent actions that the legislature and the governor have taken to try to help particularly our small businesses. Additional tax relief. So the due date for sales, meals, and room occupancy taxes are now pushed back to May 2021. And anyone who waits to pay those taxes until May of next year will not face any penalties or interest. Also, despite the fiscal crisis that the state is facing, and in fact, there's an economic roundtable being held today with experts to get a better handle on what the impact on state revenues and budget is. We did make a commitment. The Senate, the House, and the governor together announced that we will not be making any cuts to school aid or local aid. Those are the two major state budget accounts that help our cities and towns. So they're very important to the well-being of our local communities. And we committed to not make any budget cuts to those. And in fact, Chapter 70, which is our school funding, we committed to increasing it at least to reflect inflation. So the Student Opportunity Act, unfortunately, implementing that may be delayed a year or two, although we remain fully committed to it. But we will still be, we wanted to make sure at least that we won't be making any cuts to local aid or Chapter 70. Governor Baker also just recently doubled the size of the Shared Streets and Spaces program, which has been a really popular program that has helped communities to implement quick innovations to support like outdoor dining, more safe pedestrian foot traffic in our downtowns, just trying to encourage more a revitalization of our downtowns. So in Malden received over $200,000 grant for some improvements in the downtown area. And Melrose has received, I believe, 2 grants at this point for parklets, which are those little, where you take parking spots and create little seating areas or use them for other purposes, often for restaurants. And also a grant to help with sidewalk extensions and traffic calming. So those are hopefully helpful as well. And we're going to continue to support both the Shared Streets program as well as the larger Complete Streets program, which the state has had for a number of years, which is also aimed at supporting multimodal transportation options, particularly in our downtowns. Also, not just cars, but also bicycling, pedestrians, improving public transit, and so on. Also, micro enterprise grants has been another strategy, and I believe there is discussions right now about another round of grants and loans as well. That was according to Secretary Keneally, who's the Secretary of Housing and Economic Development, in a conversation that I had with him last week. In the state legislature, we, even though normally we would not be in session right now, we did vote in July to extend our session because of the crisis we're in. And there is work continuing, obviously, on the state budget for fiscal year 21. We expect to get that done in October or November. So if there's any feedback or questions about that, we, myself and my colleagues, be happy to address that. And then there are 5 conference committees that are currently doing their work. Conference committee is where the House and the Senate have passed legislation on a particular topic, but the bills are not identical. So it requires a negotiation to reconcile the differences. So we have 5 of those conference committees. There's 3 senators and 3 representatives who sit on each conference committee, both Democrats and Republicans. So we have one dealing with police reforms. We have a second conference committee dealing with climate change. The third is transportation funding. It's a bond bill or a borrowing. The fourth conference committee is dealing with healthcare, a number of issues, the primary one being telehealth. We're looking to extend the availability of telehealth and after the pandemic's over, and make sure that insurers will continue to pay our providers for telehealth. And then the fifth conference committee is dealing with economic development and housing. So let me just mention a few of the provisions that were included in the Senate's version of the economic development bill, and the House's version is, in most cases, is quite similar. So I'm pretty confident we will see a final bill on the governor's desk before the end of the year. But there's $55 million in the economic development bill for 2 programs that are run by the Mass Growth Capital Corporation, and that's to support more small business loans and grants. So that is to further capitalize Mass Growth Capital for additional loans and grants for small businesses. There's also $20 million set aside in the economic development bill directly for restaurants. So the idea is to provide financial and capital assistance to restaurants, because we know that is a sector that has been particularly hard hit. There's also $20 million in this bond bill to support the reopening of arts and cultural facilities. Our cultural sector is another sector that's been devastated by the pandemic. There's also support for housing, affordable housing and transit-oriented housing in the bill, because even before the pandemic, we had a housing crisis, unaffordable housing in the greater Boston area, and that's certainly gotten no better during the pandemic. So that continues to be a priority for us. There's also in the extensions for state and local permits that are held by real estate developers for projects that have been disrupted by the pandemic. And then also importantly, for those of you that received Paycheck Protection Program loans, the forgiveness on those loans would be excluded from your Massachusetts taxable income. So that's in this bill as well. So that's just a few of the provisions. There are a lot more. It's a very comprehensive bill, both the Senate and the House version. And again, that's in a conference committee. I do expect the committee will release a final bill that the House and Senate agree to, and that goes to Governor Baker before the end of the year. So there's a lot of helpful resources in there for small businesses and nonprofits in our state economy. I just want to remind everyone that help is available. My office and Rep. Lipper-Garabedian, Altrino and Donato's offices, that's been a big part of what we've been doing these past few months, is helping constituents navigate unemployment assistance, mass health, SNAP benefits, various state and federal agencies as well. We work closely with our congressional delegation. So, please, if you or anyone is having any issues dealing with state agencies or federal agencies, or questions or anything at all, please reach out to us, and we will do everything we can to help get things resolved. Also, mass.gov/COVID-19, as you hopefully know already, is a great resource. It's updated almost every day with new information about the Commonwealth's response to the pandemic and the reopening plans and the DPH dashboard, and lots of information that's good, solid, credible information that we can all use. So again, just want to thank you all for everything you're doing. We know there's a lot of hardship. I know there's also folks on the call that are in the early ed and childcare sector. I'm very well aware of the challenges facing that sector. In fact, I'm going to be on a call at 9:30 with early ed and childcare providers, and we are also looking at additional ways we can help that important sector of our economy. But thank you for what you're all doing. Again, I really want to thank my colleagues, because it has been a true partnership on the legislative side, and working closely with Governor Baker, Secretary Sutter, Secretary Keneally, to try to do the right thing. I mean, we certainly haven't, made every right decision in our state, and we've had tragic loss of life, and particularly in our nursing homes. But I think overall, we have been able to manage our way through this and work together and provide good information for our residents and businesses, which hasn't unfortunately been true at the national level or some other parts of our country. So anyway, I'll hand it back to you, Lauren, I think, and look forward to, I think Rep. Lipper-Garabedian was going to share some remarks, so I look forward to that and then taking any questions anyone has.
Hi, I also just want to chime in and welcome Mayor Christensen, who was able to join us a few minutes ago. So thank you, Mayor.
Sure, I will actually let Representative Lipper-Garabedian, if you had some remarks, I think, or wanted to say a few things.
Just a couple things. I think it's good to be with you this morning. It feels like a lifetime ago that we were spending a little time at the Forestdale senior housing together. At that point in time, I was not a coffee drinker, but COVID has changed many things, and now I drink coffee daily. I hope that you all are doing well. It's really nice to see you, and I think the Senator provided a very comprehensive overview of many of the state policies that we have put in place to be responsive to both the public health impact as well as the economic impact. And as the newbie on the block, it's been really a pleasure to work with both the Senator's office and my colleagues who represent Malden, as well as the local leaders who are doing so much for the small businesses and the families who make such a difference in our district. I think the only thing I would add to the Senator's remarks is just to reinforce how all of us stand ready to help folks in the community who are in real need. People who are members of the chamber naturally are going to have a better sense of some of the resources that might be available because Joan and Lauren are providing a lot of information. But many people, around us may not really recognize that their state rep or their state senator can help them navigate really complicated processes like applying for unemployment or looking for food resources or seeking housing support. And we are conduits of that information and can really help expedite sometimes the process for folks. So to the degree that you happen to hear of someone in your neighborhood who's really struggling, you feel free to let them know that a possible avenue for some quicker support could be to reach out to their elected officials. And then the other thing is I'll just put in the chat, my office has a webpage where we've housed all of the different resources we've been developing since COVID started, so that they're sort of most of them are one pagers and they link to the different resources and services that are available for a particular need. So we have one on unemployment. We have one for small businesses that the chambers have assisted me with keeping updated. I actually just looked and realized we could update it again because some of the tax relief that the Senator was mentioning happened since we produced the third version of the small business resource. But you'll see others on there for mental health. We've also summarized each of the 3 phases of the reopening plan to date, and with some links to sort of provide specific businesses, with the checklists that they need. And obviously, as a small business owner or as someone who works in the business community, you all are already very aware of some of your responsibilities and the parameters in which you're reopening, but I think the public is pretty interested in it too. So you may find some of those of use to you or other people that you know. If there are things you see that we should update, feel free to reach out to me. And also if there is a resource that you think we should develop, I'm more than willing to and interested in doing that, just to be as much of help as I can. And on my webpage, if you want, you can sign up for my email newsletter. I've been doing it once a week, summarizing things that are happening in the district as well as state updates. And so that's another way just to stay in touch. So thank you for having me today. It's good to be with you.
Thank you, Kate. I think that now we're going to start taking questions. So if you do have a question, please use the raise hand function and I will recognize you. And we will just go in order. Does anyone have a question to start out? Okay, I'm gonna then, Senator, ask one that we received ahead of time from Jack, the owner of Dockside Restaurant. He's looking for an update on the bill that was filed in the Senate regarding insurance companies honoring claims for loss of business. Do you have an update on that?
Sure. Thanks, Emily. And if anyone, even if you don't have a question for us, if you have any feedback you want to share with us, just tell us even a little bit more about what's happening with your organization right now. That's also very helpful for us to hear directly. So again, just want to encourage folks to, don't be shy, chime in. You have us all. Now you also have both mayors as well on this. So we want to hear from you. So anyway, let me quickly answer this question and then we'll hand it back to everybody. So I think what Jack's asking about is some legislation that was filed that would basically require insurers to provide, to basically cover COVID-19 as part of a disaster insurance policy. The legislation is still in the Financial Services Committee, so it has not yet gotten a recommendation from that committee, which is what would have to happen. But I think the challenge it's facing is that these insurance policies that many restaurants and businesses have explicitly exclude a virus. They're for fire or other disasters, but not a virus. So it is not a simple thing for the state to just override those contracts. And there is a concern it could have a destabilizing impact on the insurance industry as well. So we think, other ways that we know we need to help our restaurants. Obviously, there's been a lot of steps to allow things like outdoor dining, and as I mentioned, to support takeout and including alcohol. We are looking to hopefully cap the delivery fees. And then, as I mentioned, there is assistance in the economic development bond bill that we're working on now that would be directly for restaurants. And hopefully, if the federal government, if Congress, can reach an agreement at some point in the next couple months, I expect there will be assistance in there for a wide range of small businesses, and that would certainly include restaurants as well. So I wish I had a better answer, and there's no silver bullet here for restaurants or other sectors, hospitality, childcare, many sectors that have been hard hit, but we certainly will continue to do as much as we can to help.
Thank you, Senator. Next, we have Alex Pratt, if you want to unmute yourself.
Thanks, Emily. Thank you, Senator and representatives. Senator, you spoke about the eviction moratorium ending later this month. Obviously, it's something that we're very concerned about as well, and we're thinking about ways that we can act with our limited resources to try to blunt that impact when that happens. One piece of good news we got about a week ago was that a housing stability bill was reported favorably out of the Joint Committee on Housing, and it's now before each House's Rules Committee acting concurrently. So the House Rules Committee and the Senate Rules Committee acting concurrently. Do you know if there's a plan to push that through before the eviction moratorium expires later this month?
Thanks, Alex. And also let me give a shout out to the program that the Malden Redevelopment Authority and working with Mayor Christensen put together to provide rental assistance for folks who are struggling in Malden. That's a very helpful program. So you are you're right. We are very concerned that the moratorium on evictions and foreclosures is due to expire October 17th. It was going to expire sooner, but Governor Baker extended it under the authority that the legislature had previously given him to do so. So there is a piece of legislation that would extend it further and would provide some assistance to small landlords, who are not receiving rent. It is pending, as Alex said, before the Senate Ways and Means Committee and the House Ways and Means Committee. We are discussing it. I'll admit I'm not optimistic that legislation will get passed and signed into law by October 17th. Which is just around the corner. So what's happening in lieu of that, there is a CDC order as well that if we need to make sure people know about that, and that many tenants who can't pay rent because of COVID and losing their income, could be protected by the CDC order. So I think there are, not everyone would be protected, but many would be. So making sure people know about that. There are also discussions going on with the housing court about other ways to manage this after the 17th. The governor has promised that he has some policies as well that he's looking to implement, presumably using an executive order, which is much faster. So we are pushing him to get more details on that. But that legislation definitely is there. We are talking about it. And I think, if there isn't alternatives in place after the 17th to prevent kind of a mass, slew of evictions and foreclosures, then I think I will certainly be pushing, and I'm sure my colleagues will as well, to have that legislation get taken up as fast as possible. I don't know if anyone else wanted to add anything on that.
Do we have any other questions about that? If not, I understand Alex also wanted to say something about the census.
Oh, thank you. So the census is wrapping up. Senator Lewis talked about how the state has been doing a lot of work on COVID response, and some of it is no thanks to the federal government. Similarly, the census is going until the end of October, despite the best efforts of the census to end earlier. So it's really important that we make sure every person is counted. For every person counted, whether that's in Malden or Melrose, we expect to bring in about $2,400 per year over the next 10 years. So talk about counting your votes. Those are people you really want to make sure we get counted. We have been very successful with our outreach efforts, obviously with this extended time due to COVID, and because of the COVID obstacles that we face, we want to play, as the Attorney General would say, up to the buzzer. One thing that we're doing is we have a number of flyers that we have that businesses in the area have been taking, and they will either hand them out or they will put them in takeout, because a lot of businesses are doing takeout. They will put those flyers in those takeout packages so that when you get your, when you get your pizza from Jay's Pizza or whatever it is, you'll also have a flyer there. So if that's something that you or your business is interested in helping with, please let me know. I will put my information in the chat and we can connect you with those flyers. Again, $2,400 every year for every person we count. So it really does make a big difference to our community. Thank you.
Alex, if I actually could I just ask a question of you, or maybe Mayor Christensen or Mayor Broder knows, do we know where our count is at in Malden and Melrose, or that we estimate in terms of what percent of the residents have now been counted?
It's a easy question with a complicated answer. We know the number of self-reported, or the percentage of households that have self-reported, and it's about 65%. I believe it's 65.9% in Malden. However, we also know that a significant number, probably at least 20%, possibly higher, were enumerated directly by census employees, and we do not know that percentage. We know that statewide that percentage is in the high 90s. And one thing that Secretary Galvin's office has been pushing for in the last couple of weeks was for the census to share with us the local level data. Because if we found out tomorrow that Malden was 99% enumerated, which it's not, but if we found out that that was the case, that'd tell us some information that we could act on versus maybe only 15% of people were enumerated by the census, which would leave us with, I don't know, maybe 20% of folks still to go. So it's a complicated, it's an easy question. It's not an easy answer because the census hasn't been sharing all of that data with us. But we do know that our self-responses are higher than we were 10 years ago, which is remarkable considering not just the challenges of the pandemic, but also how many cuts the census has endured since then. We don't have local field offices like we used to, where someone can walk in and take the census. The census is far more understaffed, and we have the biggest bully pulpit in the world telling immigrants not to be counted. And we still, as an immigrant community, are doing better than we were 10 years ago. So we're cautiously optimistic, but we know that kind of the field has been stacked against us a little bit. So we are trying to fight for every person to be counted and to get out the count.
That's good to hear.
I think we're around 80 with all the caveats that Alex built in.
Thank you, Alex. And I think we actually also have a question for you from Brian Boswell, if you want to unmute yourself.
Oh yes, always the unmuting. Alex, quick question for, and also hi, Alex. Do we know who has not responded to the census from a demographic standpoint? Like, who should we be targeting with messaging to make sure that we can get that completed?
It's a great question. We don't know the demographics of the people who have not responded, but we do know the demographics of community groups that are harder to count. And harder to count groups include anyone who doesn't speak English, people who are immigrants, particularly people who are undocumented, folks who are younger, and children under 5. Now, obviously, children under 5 aren't expected to fill out the census on their own. But it is often the case that a household will forget to count their children, and particularly younger children. They often go uncounted. So we like to remind families that we should count everyone in your family who is living at your household on April 1st. And obviously, as we get further away from the April 1st date, it becomes harder to do so. But those are kind of the target groups that we focus on the most. Other groups include people who are formerly incarcerated are unlikely to be counted, and other groups as well. I should point out as well, renters are far more likely to be undercounted than homeowners. And in Malden, the census provides us with a map that they update weekly, showing in different census blocks, which are, think of them as different bits and pieces of neighborhoods, what percentage of households in those areas have been enumerated. And so in Malden, we've seen that the neighborhoods that are the most undercounted by that self-report data, not by, again, this is only the self-report data, this isn't the data the census itself has collected. We've seen that a number of those neighborhoods that are still left to be counted are the ones with higher renter proportions.
Thanks for that.
Thank you, Alex. I am now going to turn to Donna. Thank you for your patience. You had a question?
No problem, Emily. Thank you, Senator Lewis. Appreciate the info. And additionally, thanks, Alex, for the census stuff. Oh, sorry, my phone. Hold on. Senator Lewis, just can you talk a little bit about any bills or legislation that needs a little bit more support from voters or constituents in the sense of just pushing them to really have other representatives know this is an important issue. It needs not to fall back down the pipeline. It needs to really be pushed forward and supported. If there's something that we can do, writing, calling, emailing, knocking on doors, informing our neighborhoods. If you can just talk a little bit about those kind of legislation.
Sure, thanks, Donna. And I'll share a thought or two, but definitely, Kate or Steve or Rep Donato, jump in here as well. If you have things you're working on or particular priorities. But there are many thousands of bills that were filed at the beginning of the session. And many of those are still, alive, so to speak. So depending on anyone's particular priorities or issues you care deeply about, there are certainly bills you can be continuing to advocate for. But one in particular that I'll mention that Representative Donato filed in the House and I filed in the Senate several months ago is basically to ensure that anyone who needs to take sick time, can do so. It's essentially emergency paid sick time. And we do have already, certain amount of sick time that's required, that businesses do provide their employees in our state. And the federal government in one of the pandemic laws that they passed, the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, did expand that, but there still are major gaps. And we estimate that over a million workers in our state, aren't able to take job protected paid sick time. And, you think about, if that's the case, they may come to work, when they are contagious. And that's the last thing we want. they may not be able to also stay home to take care of an ill child or family member, which could again put others at risk. It creates a very stressful and potentially dangerous environment. So the bill that we filed, we recognize that that this burden would be difficult for businesses to bear. So the cost of providing that paid sick time would be covered by the state under the bill we filed. So we are pushing for that. Again, the challenge is finding the money to pay for it, given all the demands we have. But that is certainly a high priority for me and for for Rep Donato and many others. So that's clearly one that we'd love to still see the legislature take up. I don't know, Kate, did you want to add, or anyone else?
Well, just one other thought would be, one of the reasons that we extended the session is to complete a full fiscal year 21 budget. And so both chambers are now starting to have significant conversation. I think there's another meeting today about consensus revenue. And so there are going to be some difficult conversations and discussions about what we'll fund this year and how we'll do that. So if there are particular state programs that you think are critically important, particularly to the degree that if the chamber wants to speak to those sorts of programs for its members, or if you are a member of an association related to a particular industry or interest group, you may want to put together some communications to the delegation or to the Ways and Means leadership, the budget leadership, to sort of reinforce how important those programs and services are in the state. So that would be another thought.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, ordinarily we wouldn't be doing the annual state budget now. We would have completed it in the spring, but because of the pandemic, that's been delayed. So the fact that we are going to be doing the budget for the rest of the year is an opportunity, like it always is, for folks to weigh in with us on, particular priorities. So definitely Rep. Garabedian's right about that. And once we finish the work on the budget for the year we're in right now, which is fiscal year 21, we're going to turn the corner in January and start working on fiscal year 22, which starts July 1st next year. So again, just generally getting feedback about, priorities for the state budget. Obviously we know that Chapter 70 funding for our schools, local aid for our cities and towns, support for housing programs, for healthcare, transportation are all going to be high priorities. But if there are very specific, areas that would be of greatest assistance, definitely let us know about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I just interject and say that I think that Senator's sentiments are right on cue, and that is that you have a strong delegation, and what we need is just input from the businesses and from the citizens to say these are the priorities. These are some of the shortfalls. What you can do to help. What legislation is going on, but more important, communication is very important.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rep. Next, we have a question from Sue Sandberg. If you want to unmute yourself.
Sure, and it's not a question. This is really a compliment and words of appreciation. As Senator Lewis has spoken, and all of you representatives, I believe we're in such unprecedented times. And I cannot tell you how much I personally, as a voter in the state of Massachusetts, and also as a healthcare giver, have appreciated your leadership, the quick actions you've taken, the constant communication and transparency, including with the local mayors on here right now. I truly believe your actions and communications have really saved a lot of lives in this state and in our communities. We focus and hear the death rates every day. I wish there was a way to also speak of the lives that we have saved as a result of your quick actions and work. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Sue, for the kind words, and right back at you. We're incredibly indebted to our hospitals, to our hospital leaders, physicians, nurses, all of our first responders. I mean, you were right there, back in the spring when we didn't know a lot about the virus. We weren't even sure about exactly how to protect ourselves. We had shortages of personal protective equipment, and that didn't stop, folks from putting themselves and at risk to help others. And so it's been incredible and inspiring to see that, and that's ongoing, of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah.
Thank you, Sue. And I also just want to direct everyone to the chat. Alex has posted his contact information in case anyone wants to get in touch about census flyers. So we highly encourage you to do what you can in that space. Does anyone else have a comment or anything they want to share? We still have some time.
I'll just jump in here while you're thinking about anything else you want to share with us. Just a plug for make a plan for voting. One of the most important elections we will probably any of us will live through. So make a plan. Make sure everyone has a plan to vote. You could request a mail-in ballot. Those many voters have already requested them. They should be arriving in your at your home very soon if they haven't already, and send that ballot and the mail-in ballot back as soon as possible. Again, you can vote early in person starting October 17th, I believe. There'll be a 2-week period where you can go and vote in person, and then of course on November 3rd on Election Day. We know that both in Melrose and Malden, our city clerks and their staff are terrific. They are working super hard to make sure that the election goes smoothly, recruiting poll workers, and I have full confidence that they're going to run a very smooth election. And again, whether you vote by mail, whether you vote early in person, or whether you vote on Election Day, those are all options for folks to vote safely and securely. So please, we need to make sure everyone votes. And thank you also to our mayors and their teams. And again, our city clerks for the good work they're doing.
And I'm just going to hop on that with another plug we've been really hearing about from city clerks. If you can get the day off on Election Day and you're interested in being a poll worker, that is really needed right now. Most of our poll workers are in vulnerable populations like our grandparents, or my grandparents at least. And if you can take the day, it's really not hard. I did it in September and it's a good time.
Yes, shout out to Emily. She took a day off work on September 1st and was a poll worker. Actually, and Tom Dalton in my office also did that. So we had two folks doing that. So anyone who wants to be or knows someone who could be a poll worker, that's a great way to contribute and give back to our communities.
Absolutely. And if you're interested, a good way to start out is just to contact your city clerk about it. They'll tell you what they need from you.
Hey, Emily. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us this morning. I thank you, Senator Lewis, as always, for giving us your time and your insight. We so appreciate everything you do for our communities. I'd like to thank Emily. As I say, Emily makes the trains run on time, as far as I'm concerned. She's just a real asset to both Lauren and myself, and I know we really appreciate her. Thank all of you for coming, to our mayors, our state legislators, our city councilor, and you, our business leaders, for giving us the time this morning to join us for this Zoom breakfast. It's a great way to start our day. So thank you all for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Be safe
Thank
and have
you
a
for all
great
that you're
day.
doing.